Hi, everyone, and welcome to Cassandra Lunch number 71. I was getting a little ahead of my skis there by showing the presentation slide deck first. But today I'll be going over creating a user profile using DataStax Astra. I did set up a React client, but spent too much time on getting it to look pretty than actually connecting it. So I'll just be demonstrating in a different manner today. The co-organizers for this event are Raul Singh, Arpan, and myself, and we are always looking for speakers, sponsors, and members. So definitely spread the word and bring a friend. If you or someone you know would like to learn a technology and share it with the Cassandra community, this is a great place to do that, and definitely reach out to myself, Arpan, or Raul, probably in that order in regards to getting a hold of us. Same for if you or someone you know would like to sponsor this and get their name featured in our webinar. We are a part of a larger community. Data Community DC is a diverse and inclusive culture. We encourage and celebrate different races, genders, religions, sexual orientations. Everyone's welcome here, and we expect respect to be given to those classes. You can find out more about Data Community DC at their blog, as well as other events that Data Community DC is a part of. What we cover here is everything related to Cassandra. So it could be Cassandra itself or surrounding technologies, tools used, inner workings and details of Cassandra in general, as well as DataStax, the enterprise version of Cassandra. At this point in the introduction, we do encourage any new members or people joining for the first time to kind of unmute, share their video, and maybe say what they do with Cassandra. Hey, Todd.
Yeah, I'll go first. My name's Todd Plaker. I'm a VP of Software Engineering at JP Morgan. We utilize Cassandra internally on we use it both with AWS as well as Google, and we are starting to look at Azure, but we also host it internally for some of our financial products. But we utilize Cassandra based on some of the applications we need in the fintech space.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for sharing, Todd. Appreciate you joining us today.
Sure.
Doesn't look like it, so we'll continue. Group roles, if you have a question, just ask it. Be polite and courteous to others and share what you know. This is meant to be a discussion. So thanks again, Todd, for just sharing what you do with Cassandra with us. Here at Anant, we deal with real-time data platforms. Cassandra is a tool we use frequently, along with Spark and Kafka. And yeah, so we like to architect solutions for our clients. DataStax is a partner with us as well. We just did a 3-part webinar series with them, which should be up on YouTube, so definitely check that out. Going over migrating to the cloud. We'll just breeze through these sponsors real quick. And 15-second announcements, any jobs, meetups, hackathons, or conferences. We'll move on. We have our own announcement that Anant is hiring full or part-time positions for data platform operators, engineers, and architects. You can find out more at careers.anant.us. So go ahead and connect with us there if you're seeing this on YouTube. This still applies. We are always looking for professionals, Cassandra professionals, so definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us. And some upcoming events. We have a sister lunch to this, Data Engineers Lunch, which occurs every Monday at noon Eastern. We'll have a guest speaker next week. Karthik is going to be going over Bodo AI and kind of what it's capable of, as well as for the next Cassandra Lunch, we'll be going over Databricks and Cassandra. And then the following Data Engineers Lunch would be deploy Cassandra using DSC operator to Kubernetes. You can find all of our events listed at anant.us/events. And all of these videos are uploaded to YouTube to our Cassandra Lunch playlist. and they are available there. If you're watching us on YouTube, we're happy to have you. And Cassandra.Link should be your #1 resource for all things Cassandra. This is a hand-curated grouping of articles by our very own Raul Singh. So a lot of great resources here you can see in relation to Cassandra, Spark, Kafka. So Cassandra and all the surrounding resources. Definitely, if there's a topic you're interested in, chances are it's documented here, and would highly encourage you to check it out. And with that, I will hop over to what I'd accidentally shown you guys earlier. So yeah, I'll be going over creating a user profile using DataStax Astra. We'll kind of talk a little bit about the data model of what that would look like. And then, as I mentioned for the demo, my React client, I was not able to get connected in time, but fortunately, Katacoda, one of the resources I have listed here, makes it easy to just kind of do examples of that online. So I'll show you guys that when we get to the demo portion. So without further ado, so let's talk a little bit about DataStax Astra. DataStax Astra is Cassandra in the cloud, and I'm sure everyone here is probably familiar with Cassandra if you're joining this lunch, as being highly available, horizontal scaling, distributed, no single point of failure. And Astra provides the ability to use Cassandra as a service, essentially. So it's Cassandra in the cloud already set up for you, no configuration. You can just set up, and I'll actually show you guys my Astra account and demonstrate how easy it is to set up a database, and then show you a few different ways you can work with it. One thing I did want to go over is there are some, since it's Cassandra as a service, you are limited to some configurations. And we can kind of go through their documentation there to better, I figured it'd be better to just go through them and actually show you what they have to say about those limitations and stuff like that. But essentially the great thing about Astra is it eliminates your overhead to install, operate, and scale Cassandra. It's free to get started. Out of the box REST and GraphQL endpoints and a browser CQL shell, which we'll demonstrate a little bit of. And it is powered by DataStax open source Kubernetes operator for Cassandra. And you can choose, and you'll see this later when I'm kind of doing my demo portion, that you can choose to deploy on AWS, Google Cloud providers, or Microsoft Azure. As well as, and that spans across their US East and West data centers, and I believe there's even more options. So we'll take a look at that here shortly. And it is compatible with open source Cassandra. So getting into a little bit of the Cassandra data modeling, if you're coming from a SQL or relational data model, one thing you need to know right out the bat is joins are not allowed. So one thing that takes some time getting used to, especially if you have a lot of experience in the SQL world, moving to Cassandra. And tables are created on a per query basis. So we need to think about the data we want to store and retrieve before we create our tables. And primary key definitions will determine how data will be queried. So in this model over here, you can kind of get a sense of what this data model would look like for a video application, something like YouTube, and the tables that would be required. So you'd need your users table, then user details, ratings by users. So this is a common naming convention in Cassandra is naming your tables based on the query you need. So ratings by user, I can just infer from this table name that, okay, part of the primary key is going to be, or clustering columns is going to involve ratings and user. So as you can see, user ID is the primary key, what this large K stands for, and then they have clustering columns sorting by descending order, the rated date, and ascending order video ID. And then there's the associated data with this, which there are ways to query on it, but by default, you would not be able to query by, say, name.
I have a question.
Yeah, go
In
ahead.
in your experience, have you had or used any Cassandra data modeling tools that, like, especially if you have a large, disparate, or 24/7 follow the sun development team, where you're trying to have changes and they potentially could be changing the Cassandra data model? Do you guys use any tools that will, like, help facilitate that or keep the data model up to date, or at least identify, hey, we should probably tweak the data model in order to gain more efficiency in storing the data with query performance or things like that? How do you attenuate back something like that into a Cassandra data model?
So personally, for me, I don't have a ton of experience or any experience really in the production level use of Cassandra, but I know Deepin or Obi, would one of you guys be able to answer that question?
Yeah, hey, guys, sorry, I raised my hand. Apparently nobody can see it. So there is one tool which has like a native Cassandra kind of discovery tool. So you can like point it to a Cassandra database and it can like pull it into the data modeler. It's called Hackalade. And Hackalade is actually for beyond Cassandra. It's really like their goal is to be like a NoSQL data modeling tool, but it does a good job of inferring Cassandra, documenting it, the schema. You can make changes, and it can actually generate CQL as well to push it back into Cassandra. There is a, I think it's called DB Visualizer, which I have used in the past for talking to Cassandra and documenting. That's not it. That's from JetBrains, I think. But it does say that it has. No, this is not it. It'll come to me. But there is a tool with like something like that named DB Visualizer or something like that, which basically does. Its a whole job is to document and manipulate database schemas for the purpose of exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
I'm going to look it up and I'll put it into the chat if I can find it. But Hackalade is designed for Cassandra. Like, sure. I've met the CEO at a conference, and he was explaining like the whole process of how they got into the Cassandra world, and I find it's probably the best one out there.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Raul, and good question, Todd. Okay, so moving on, we did just give a talk, and it's up on YouTube, about the basics of Cassandra, and we went over, one of our engineers went over data modeling and stuff like that, so I'll spare you guys talking too much about this. But so in this, we need to query to create a user profile by capturing a username, password, first name, last name, email. In this, we'd want to query by username and then verify the password. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Stephen. And then we would also want to query by user ID once we verified that password to get that profile information. Like I said, my client was not up and running in time for this presentation, unfortunately. But with that being said, I did want to hop over to Katacoda to take a look at the statements actually involved. And actually, before I do that, I'll show you guys Astra in question. I think this is a really great tool. Makes it real easy to use, and then we'll actually even, so you can see I have my user profile set up here, but if you wanted to create a database in Astra, so let's say we'll call it user profile 2, and you can initialize it with a key space already, so we'll say test profiles, something like that. So we'll have a default key space already in there. And as I mentioned before, there's support for Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft Azure. And you can see there's multiple regions you can choose from. And it's globally, so Astra is available globally for you on these web services. And then you can see in each of these subcategories, then there are regions for all of them. So it's pretty neat how quickly you can set up a Cassandra database and have it installed and running, and then accessible to start adding data to it. So we'll go, I'm in the West Coast, so I'll just use Google Cloud and use their US West 1 and create it. And you can see there's some, oh, I already clicked beyond it, but there were some pricing variations between the cloud providers. In this case, I don't believe there was a credit card required to sign up for Astra. In many places, if you just Google it, they'll give you a code to get $200. I saw it just one, it was like code Google 200, and they would give you $200 to start playing around with, which was really nice.
Yeah, and actually, I just talked to Cedric, who kind of leads the dev relation stuff at DataStax. And he's mentioned it several times. So like, if you go to the Fellowship of the Rings Discord chat, that is usually where you can just ask for a voucher and they'll just give it to you. So pro tip. So sorry about that interruption. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah, definitely check out their Cassandra Fellowship of the Rings Discord. They'll be able to help you out with any questions you have. They're really, really friendly people over there. So yeah, it's really easy to get started. And then as Raul mentioned, it's especially if you're just going to be playing around with it and trying to see whether or not it's a viable option for you and your team. They really make it accessible in that regard. Obviously, once you get to a production level, those cost considerations are going to have to come into play, in which case looking at the cloud provider and the options there is something you're going to want to consider. But hopping over to just a quick demo, also recommend Katacoda for anyone who wants to just kind of get their hands on Cassandra, but doesn't want to have to deal with install, configuration, setup, anything like that. It just gives you Cassandra right out of the box in the browser and has these scenarios which are really helpful for going through to learn Cassandra. And actually, I'll take some of these queries and show you in Astra's CQL terminal or shell how you can run these there just as easily. So in regards to the user profile, you can see here, we'll create our key space. Simple strategy and replication factor 1 are kind of atypical, but good for messing around. You wouldn't see that in production. And then I'm gonna create the table credentials by email. So as you can see, the primary key here specified via email, as I mentioned before. That's how this table is going to be queried. So if you go ahead and run this, it'll create our tables. And you could say in here, and you can see our table was created. And then, so another way, profiles by ID, where we would be searching for data on a user based by a user ID. This would tend to occur like after logging in, confirming that they have, or actually to find a password and verify that, although this one doesn't include password. So we'll create that table. And now if we describe that key space, you're able to see in here all of our tables. Here we go. You get to see details of the key space itself, its replication factor, that sort of thing. Well, I guess you don't see, oh yeah, and then you also see your tables, what's been run here. And then some of the metadata about those tables. We'll go ahead and run these insert statements. And this is what the shell looks like. So this is giving you a genuine experience of working in a Cassandra shell as well, how it appears visually. how you're able to use Cassandra query language to, in this case, select all from credentials by email, select all from both tables essentially. And actually, the one thing I wanted to show you guys is how you can use these same things in Astra itself. So actually, I know I already have those in here. We'll go here. We'll go to our CQL console. And this is going to load up a similar environment, just like the one we're using in Katacoda right now. There are no, oh, we do have a key space that we initialized this. So let's see what I, thought I started with a, oh, test profiles. There it is. So describe. And you can see this is a more typical kind of strategy, class and strategy and replication factor. And it automatically created it for me. So we're using network topology strategy. We're using data center US West 1 with a replication factor of 3. And we will use that table. So let's go, or use that key space. And we'll go ahead and insert data just like we did here. So we'll create our table. And you can see it's been created. So this is a really nice feature of Astra. If you just want to quickly get your hands dirty, I wanted to demonstrate that just kind of how easy it is to use this. Also, I wanted to kind of go over some of the configuration settings they put in for you when you're using Astra. So you do lose, when using Astra, some of the ability to mess with these limits, you know.
Is there a particular like authentication or security measures for connecting up to Astra in terms of, you know, or in this case, yeah, I saw you said it said TLS, but is there like specific, like you could harden the security or you can lessen the security for either ingress or egress out?
As far as egress, I'm not entirely sure, but I know in this there's certain drivers depending on the way you configure it and you're communicating with it. So if you go here to connect, and there's package, there's a let's see, there's a secure connect bundle that you typically have to include.
Like generate a token, share a public key so that you could set up a secure communication or connection to the two.
Exactly. And I believe it varies based on how you're doing it. So my background tends to come from JavaScript, so I would use Node.js. But this bundle here is exactly what I'm talking about. So you'd have to download this and incorporate it into your, if you're using this driver, I should say, this is how you would connect. As far as what I was trying to do, so I've used the driver before. This is a file you import into your client code. And it would be saved in your root package, and there would be some configuration fields in there, as well as a one-time use key, or not one-time use key, I should say. It only shows it to you one time, so you better save it or have a really good memory. But you would import that into your client in this regard, and then communicate via that way. I was hoping to do it via the REST API using curl commands, and you can see you do have to specify your ID, region, key space where you're trying to access, and then that token.
Yeah, so that's what I think Arpan mentioned, is that when you create new keys, you can give it different permissions to like read only or insert on the API side. On the CQL side, I think you can add, yes, you're managing endpoints, but generally in Cassandra, you have users or what they call roles, and then you can grant access to roles, just like you can do like in a relational database, like
Right.
grant, select, up, whatever, like all of the major things you can do in a data modification language, you can define that in a grant statement. But I don't think on Astra, because it's like a hosted service, is there a way to add new users? I thought you'd only get one user and you have as many tokens as you want. Is that right?
I know it does create, let's see.
But yeah, where I was going with it is kind of what you touched on, was having an account or a profile that had like read, and it would have security. But then if you had one that did like insert, read, write, or update, it would have maybe a little bit of hardened, more security.
Yeah.
One of the things that burned us in the past was we were using something like that with a bundle package, and they deprecated out certain SHA encryption, and we wound up not realizing that because who reads the fine print detail, and so we had to go back and change that. And so that's why it was something that brought up in my mind whether or not, we thought it was just simply the token expired and we generated a new one, still didn't work, but it was something like that. So
so he's shown you like this is on the admin side of Astra, but like as I mentioned in Cassandra, you can do it with CQL, but essentially they're giving you all of these options for a select role, just to be able
read,
to
write. I see it right there. Read, write, read only, administrate.
Great question.
Does that answer your question,
Yeah,
Todd?
yeah. You totally hit the mark.
Cool. Astra, it really so as Raul was saying, this is something that you can you can configure yourself in Cassandra, but here Astra is just taking the actual coding of what you would do or those files that you'd have to change and makes it into an easy to use little user interface. So in regard, sorry, go ahead. I'm just hearing things. So in regards to, let's see, let's insert our data. That's not going to work. I wanted to show you can insert data directly into Astra as well using that CQL. And actually that kind of, unfortunately, is as far as with my client not connecting the way I wanted it to. That'll be all I have to show you guys today. But let's go back to that console and incorporate that. So if any of you guys have more, Todd, if you have any more questions, Raul is one of the smartest guys when it comes to Cassandra, I think, probably on the planet.
The only other question I would have would be for I'm assuming on a profile that somewhere in Cassandra or even Astra, it encrypts the profile information, and that there's some kind of operational table where that the profile information stored within Cassandra. If we had data that we were putting into, and that might be something on another topic, is there an easy way to encrypt that or define the encryption for that, so that if you were creating new profiles and you're like, is that something that Astra, you show the default profiles, and maybe Astra doesn't, because it's a free version, doesn't have the ability to create a new profile group or things like that. So I understand if you don't have that ability. But my question would be, if I created it, how do you pick the encryption on that, or specify for this profile, you want to encrypt this within the table or things like that? Is that something that Cassandra does at an operational level by default? It says, here's what you get right out of the box, or you've got to set it up. I've never installed Cassandra straight from the get-go. It's already been built. Someone's already given it to me, and I kind of gone through there. But that's why I was just wondering, if you had to install it fresh and then you're dealing with user profiles, do you have to define the encryption for that, or is it already pre-built and it's pre-canned and you don't really have to touch it and worry about it?
You're muted.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Raul, you're doing the awesome Zoom. You're muted. I do it like 9 times a day, so I understand.
So generally in Cassandra, and for the most part in DataStax, there is something called transparent data encryption at the table level. And when you do that, the data, so when you were saying user profile, I'm thinking two things. One is you made a table, it's your data versus the data that is in Cassandra for the role that's logging in. So those are two different things.
Right.
I'm talking about like your user profile data, meaning like, I'll just call it application data.
Right.
So there's a thing called transparent data encryption, which you can encrypt on a table by table basis, or you can use the same key to encrypt multiple tables. And unless you have that key, you can't read from that table, even if you have access to that as a user, right? So that's the built-in Cassandra encryption. Another way that people do encryption is when they use EBS to back their drive in AWS, they just use EBS encryption, which is super fast. And they just control all of the access in a way that, you know, basically you can do as, you know, client to node encryption. You can do node to node encryption. And then what I'm talking about is data encryption. So, you know, transparent data encryption is one way, EBS is another way. But there's another provider, again, I'm going to draw a blank here because I haven't thought about this problem in like maybe a few years, but their approach to doing encryption is they create a proxy that is CQL compliant, and it wraps your database. And when you talk to it using CQL driver or Cassandra driver, it'll work like Cassandra. But what it's actually doing is it's encrypting data and saving it in Cassandra. So even if you had the key, like as an admin, you wouldn't be able to read the data because it would be garbage.
Right.
Because it's kind of it's playing the middleman in a good way to encrypt and decrypt data into Cassandra. And generally what people would do is they would, if they wanted to have a column level encryption, they would homebrew it, or they would use a tool like this to say, I want these columns to be encrypted and I want these columns to be transparent, or I want these columns to be masked.
Right.
You know, so like just show the last 4 digits of social security number, things like that. So yeah, I'll Google it, my extra brain, and I'll let you know. Good question. Yeah, I haven't thought about that in a while.
Well, from a fintech space, everything's got to be encrypted. People are weird about that with their money. Go figure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so generally, like, you know, client to node, you got to have, node to node, you got to have, data encryption at rest, you got to have, but then actually the data, you know, even an admin being able to see it, that's a different level of security. And so that there is a thing called row-based access control in Cassandra, that if you combine that with some basic encryption, row-based access can do 80 to 90% of what you're talking about without having this extra layer.
Right. Thanks.
It sounds like we could have an entire feature talk on encryption in Cassandra.
Yeah, no, totally. Security and encryption is huge. Otherwise, people don't use technology. So yeah, thanks.
So that's kind of it for my presentation, guys. If anyone has further questions on, I should probably check the chat. Oh, I see Arpin contributed as well. Unless, yeah, Todd, you have further questions, or anyone else?
No, I'm good. It was good. It was a good talk.
Yeah, glad you could join us today and kind of give us insight into how Cassandra is being used elsewhere. Fintech makes sense. So yeah, it's really cool. I'm glad Raul could chime in. He is, again, the Cassandra guru of the world, I would say, as far as my knowledge goes.
There's a lot more people that know a lot more about Cassandra.
I was going to say, there's always that other person. Yeah, there's always that other person that you think you know it. You think one person knows everything, and then you find out on a Slack channel or Discord, you're like, wow, that guy knows a lot, or that girl knows a lot. So
yeah, I would say if you go to Cassandra Apache Slack group, which used to be open and easy to get into, but apparently now you need an invite. You know, I'm in there. If you want to be invited, let me know. But basically, there's a dev channel and then there's a users channel. Users channels is where like normal people who use Cassandra who are like, I need help with this.
Right.
And there's a bunch of people that'll chime in. Then you go to the dev channel where these are the people that are building Cassandra, right? That stuff is at a different level, right? That's a whole different level. I mean, we're talking about lines or providers in the class in the Java code that does XYZ and how to fix it. And
they're complaining
you know,
about PRs and the use of like code, you know, no, I know that world. It's you know, I turn it off so I can actually get things done sometimes.
Yeah, right. There's so much stuff going on in that channel. It's just like,
Exactly.
No, good stuff. By the way, I spoke, as I was mentioning, I spoke to Cedric. So one of the things we're going to be doing is partnering with DataStax to start streaming to the Fellowship of the Rings Discord, and maybe even using their Restream account to stream stuff. Basically taking Cassandra Lunch global. And so, you know, we may adjust the time so that it fits in with the overall workshop schedule, so we don't conflict with their schedule. And likely we would be doing a session that is, you know, more conducive to people coming from all over the world in one hemisphere and another hemisphere. So just some talk that I had this morning. So more good things to come from Cassandra Lunch. Just want everybody to be kind of tuned in. And, you know, it looks like, you know, Todd, you might have some experience. Before we launch that initiative, you know, we're going to line up probably 15, 20 external speakers. So if you're interested in talking about, it doesn't matter, whatever, it's how you're using it. Your challenges.
Right now, right now, the way we're utilizing it is for blob image storage to have fast retrieval. So you've got some kind of document, financial instrument that you need. You know, someone says, well, that's not what I signed, or that's, you know, somebody wants to really question what the document was. You got to be able to pull it up and have that. But depending on the size of your institution, that could be a lot of documentation, and that could be a lot of you know, storage. So that's usually compressed and stored off, and then you've got to, you know, you wind up in the technical challenges of being able to deliver that. And Cassandra is a solution that was looked in at this, particularly for its NoSQL features and things like that.
Yeah. Hey, that's a great topic. That's the thing. Like it's important for the community to see how people are using it, so that it kind of gives people ideas, but it's also, I think, important for the larger potential community to come across talks like that and be like, oh, I didn't know people did that with Cassandra.
Right.
So, yeah, you know, if you drop in a private message, I don't know if you can, you might be able to say, send me in a private message, like your email address, and I'll get in touch with you, because I would love to have you speak on Cassandra Lunch the next upcoming month or so. Cool. Awesome. Anybody else have any questions? I know a few people are in the midst of kind of learning Cassandra. Any basic questions? Yep. Awesome. Well, I don't know why my hand is still raised. I got your email address, Todd, thanks. And I'll ping you.
Sure.
Momentarily.
No, I know how that goes. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Todd, and thanks everyone else for joining. And yeah, if you're watching YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe.